Imagine you're traveling in another country. It's late at night. You've just left a nightclub and you're alone. And you need to get back to your hostel. So you do what millions of us would do without even thinking about it. You pull out your phone, you open Google Maps, you search for directions back to where you're staying, and then, instead of following those directions, you start walking the opposite way. Your phone continues connecting to the internet, you continue looking at the map, you move farther away from where you were supposed to be, and then, sometime after midnight, your phone stops communicating. You are never seen again. Part 1. The Trip. In 2019, Theo Hayes was an 18-year-old from Belgium traveling through Australia. He had been backpacking for months and was nearing the end of his trip. By late May, Theo had arrived in Byron Bay. If you never heard of Byron Bay, picture the kind of Australian destination that seems almost designed for backpackers. Beaches, surfing, hostels, nightlife, travelers from all over the world. It wasn't supposed to be the setting for a disappearance. On May 31st, 2019, Theo went out for the evening. He eventually ended up at a nightclub called Cheeky Monkeys. And at first, nothing about the night seemed particularly unusual. There were other backpackers around him. People were drinking, people were talking. Just another night during a long trip through Australia. But at approximately 11 p.m., something happened that changed everything. Theo was asked to leave the nightclub. Staff apparently believed he was showing signs of intoxication. And suddenly, Theo was outside, alone. Part 2. Google Maps. This is where his phone becomes incredibly important, because investigators would later reconstruct portions of Theo's movements using digital information. After leaving the nightclub, Theo took out his phone and he searched Google Maps. The destination? The Wake-Up Hostel. The place where he was staying if he had simply followed the route. He should have headed back towards the hostel, but he didn't. Instead, Theo walked in another direction, away from his accommodation. And that is the first detail in this case that I can't stop thinking about. Why? Was he confused? Was he planning to meet someone? Did he simply decide he wasn't ready to go back? Or was there another reason? Because Theo wasn't necessarily bad with directions. In fact, testimony during the investigation indicated that he was comfortable navigating using Google Maps. So him heading away from his hostel didn't automatically mean he was lost. And his phone activity becomes even stranger. Part 3. The Wrong Direction. Theo headed toward a darker residential area. Eventually, he reached recreational grounds near Byron Bay, and here, he stopped for several minutes, approximately 7 minutes. And while he was there, his phone data indicated something fascinating. Theo was looking at Google Maps, zooming in and zooming out, looking around the surrounding area, but apparently not searching for another specific destination. Think about that for a second. It's late at night, you're alone, in a place you don't particularly know very well. You've already searched for directions back to your hostel, but instead of following them, you've gone somewhere else. And now you're standing there, studying the map. What was Theo looking for? A shortcut? The beach? Another location? Someone? We don't know. But eventually, he started moving again. Part 4. Toward the beach. Theo's movements took him towards the area around Tallow Beach. There are coastal tracks, bushland, darkness, cliffs, and water nearby. And remember, this is happening around midnight. Investigators would later spend an enormous amount of time trying to reconstruct exactly where Theo went. His phone was still producing digital traces, connections, activity, pieces of information that showed that, at least for a while, Theo was still out there. But there was another strange element. What's up? Part 5. The messages. During the night, Theo was using WhatsApp. At approximately midnight, messages were being exchanged, and investigators were able to establish that his phone remained active after he had left the nightclub. That's important, because this wasn't a situation where someone walked out of a building and their phone immediately went dead. There was a trail, a digital trail, Google activity, network connections, messages, location information, tiny electronic footprints showing that Theo continued moving through the night, until eventually the footprints stopped. His phone ceased communicating, and Theo disappeared with it. No confirmed sighting of him afterward. No message explaining where he was going. No call saying he was in trouble. Nothing. Part 6. The next morning. At first, nobody knew something terrible had happened. Remember, Theo was backpacking. When you're traveling like that, plans change. People meet other travelers. They stay somewhere else. They don't necessarily check in after a few hours. But as time passed, people began realizing something wasn't right. Theo hadn't returned. His belongings were still at the hostel, and eventually his family became deeply concerned. On June 6th, almost a week after Theo had been last seen, he was officially reported missing. And then the search began. Part 7. The search. Police searched the Byron Bay area. The coastline became a major focus. People looked through bushland, beaches, cliffs, water, anything that could explain where an 18-year-old traveler could have gone after midnight. His face became recognizable throughout Byron Bay, and investigators turned toward one of the most valuable witnesses they had, Theo's phone. Because your phone remembers things you don't. Every connection, every app, every location signal, every interaction could potentially leave something behind. Investigators analyzed Theo's digital information, trying to reconstruct his final hours. And slowly, they created a picture of his movements. But there was a frustrating problem. A digital trail can tell you where your phone probably was. It can't necessarily tell you why. Google Maps could show that Theo was examining the area. It couldn't tell investigators what he was thinking. His network connections could indicate movement. They couldn't tell investigators whether he was alone, and that's why this case becomes so unsettling. We know quite a lot about Theo's final movements, and somehow, we still don't know what happened. Part 8. The theories. There are several possibilities. The first is an accident. Theo was near difficult coastal terrain at night. Could he have fallen? Could he have entered the water? Could darkness have caused him to misjudge the landscape? It's possible, and searches of the coastline were extensive, but no definitive evidence has ever provided a complete answer. Then there's the possibility that Theo encountered another person. This possibility received enormous attention from people who have studied the case. Did he meet someone? Was there a reason he deliberately walked away from his hostel? Could someone have told him to go somewhere? And could that explain why he appeared to be studying Google Maps rather than simply following the directions he originally searched? Again, we don't know, and that's important. There are countless theories online about this case. Some sound convincing, some are incredibly elaborate, but a theory isn't evidence, and the official investigation has never established exactly what happened to Theo. Part 9. The Inquest. Years after Theo disappeared, a coronial inquest examined the evidence surrounding his disappearance. Investigators reviewed witness testimony, phone data, search efforts, his movements, theories, and possible explanations. But ultimately, there wasn't enough evidence to determine how Theo died. The coroner concluded that Theo was deceased, but the cause and manner of his death could not be determined, which means that after the investigators reconstructed his night, almost minute by minute, the most important part of the story remains missing. What happened after his final digital traces? Part 10. Think about this. And this is what makes Theo's disappearance so haunting to me. We're living in an era where disappearing should practically be harder than ever. We carry GPS devices everywhere. Our phones connect to towers. We send messages. We open apps. We take photos. We leave digital evidence constantly. Theo did all of those things. He opened Google Maps. He communicated through his phone. His movements created a digital trail. Investigators had technology that detectives decades ago could only dream about. And still, at some point during that night, an 18-year-old man essentially walked beyond the edge of that digital trail. Imagine looking at the final location data, knowing that Theo was there, knowing approximately what he was doing, and knowing that somewhere between that moment and the moment his phone went silent, something happened. Something that nobody has been able to explain. The ending. Theo Hayes disappeared from Byron Bay on May 31st, 2019. His family has spent years searching for answers. And although investigators have uncovered an extraordinary amount of information about his final night, the central question remains. Why did Theo search Google Maps for his hostel and then walk the other way? Maybe the answer is completely innocent. Maybe he wanted to visit the beach. Maybe he was taking a shortcut. Maybe he planned to meet somebody. But until we know what happened after his phone stopped communicating, that little blue map on his screen represents one of the last windows we have into his final hours. He was 18 years old, thousands of miles from home, walking through Byron Bay after midnight, looking at a map, and then he was gone. If you want more real disappearances, strange cases, and mysteries that still don't have answers, subscribe to FearFab, because the next case gets even stranger.